So it's funny. I was wondering what I was going to talk about, or whether I should start an entire other series. Maybe one of the things that we talked about at the beginning of the year. And through this week, I kept getting these hits. It's like kind of like spirit tapping on my shoulder, and it was essentially about forgiveness and kind of where we are in the life of this nation, and maybe where forgiveness fits into our processes as individuals. And forgiveness, we talked the last couple of weeks about self-care, and if the things that we talked about over the last couple of weeks, the physical, spiritual, emotional, workplace, relationship kinds of self-care, those are like regular self-care, then forgiveness is like graduate level self-care, because it's really it's really a step above and beyond. And it's also difficult because it goes so deep into who we are and into our pain. It's it's kind of like that work that Laura had done this week. I mean, it's like, yes, there's this painful thing, and digging it out is really gonna hurt, but in the long run, after it's healed up, we're better. And so it's really, it's worth it in the long run. As much as we may not want to face it, as much as we may not want to admit we have a problem with it, as much as we may not want to go to the damn doctor over it, when we go and we do that painful work that has to be done to dig out whatever it is, it's a game changer. It really, really is. And fortunately, hopefully, while the abscess won't come back, on the unfortunate side, forgiveness work is something that's ongoing. And for me, it's a lot like the work I do in 12-step. In order to kind of keep my forgiver up to date on everything, I can't stop. It's like I keep going to meetings. I keep going to 12-step meetings. Well, I need to keep doing forgiveness work. And one of the ways I can tell that I'm getting clogged up spiritually is like, well, it's like, okay, when's the last time I actually sat down and worked out some forgiveness work? Well, okay, maybe it's time. It's like when I look at my meditation app, and maybe I've only meditated 3 or 4 times this week. It's like, yeah, Charles, that's not enough. I mean, it's okay if I miss a day. That's I can do okay with that. But if I've only meditated 3 times this week, I'm in trouble. And forgiveness is kind of the same way. We need to make a practice of it, and we need to understand how that practice works and why it's important and why it's worth going through the pain. So I want to start off by saying Happy Valentine's Day. So happy Valentine's Day. And I thought it was interesting. I was like, okay, so where did this actually come from? And it kind of goes back to a no good deed goes unpunished story. So according to Wikipedia, there are a lot of different martyrdom stories and different Valentines that are connected with the 14th of February. But the one that kind of stands out was the imprisonment of Saint Valentine of Rome for ministering to Christians persecuted under the Roman Empire in the 3rd century. And some stories say specifically for marrying them against the edicts of the Roman Empire. So, kind of a romantic sort of thing to do. And according to early tradition, he restored sight to the blind daughter of his jailer. And then I love this. Numerous later editions of the legend have been related to the theme of love. An 18th century embellishment to the legend claims he wrote the jailer's daughter a letter signed, "Your Valentine," as a farewell before his execution. So, yeah. But the things that we do for love, can be risky. can get us into trouble, like they did St. Valentine there. But ultimately, I think they're worth it. And in terms of those things that are worth it for love, I mean, forgiveness kept coming to me. It was fun. Like the final nail in the coffin is, am I going to talk about this or not? As Laura and I have been not exactly binging, but we've been watching Star Trek Discovery pretty regularly. And right now we're in the portion of season 2 where the main character, who is Spock's adopted or foster sister, and she's been chasing him around the galaxy. He's kind of been on the run. This all happens before the original series. And they had a falling out that she had prompted because she thought it was the right thing to do. She thought it would make their family safer. There was a time on Vulcan when anything having to do with a human, and she was human, was under attack. And it kind of seemed like for a while there, Spock really just didn't have any forgiveness in his heart for her. But this episode we watched last night, he told her, he said, I forgive you. And it just, it kind of kept coming back. Will you forgive me is a pretty common ask. And, it seems like at the national level, there are a lot of people who are thinking that, they're somehow owed some forgiveness, or at least, the ability not to be criticized. And so I had to think about that as well. And so Haley, I've got a picture of this little robot guy holding a flower, and it says, "Please forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wasn't thinking. I'm sorry." And there's a piece there that while, we're as responsible for our non-thought as we are for our thought, when there are consequences, we're responsible for those consequences. But, one of the pieces to that is being awake enough to realize we were asleep, to realize, hey, I wasn't thinking. And, that speaks to the whole, the whole idea of being, quote, woke, unquote. Hey, I woke up, I realized I am a white, heterosexual, cisgender boomer dude, and that privileged the crap out of me. There are a lot of people who are just not awake to that. And then there are a lot of people who are steadfastly refusing to wake up to that idea, So for them, they're not even asking for forgiveness because they don't believe they've done anything wrong. So how do we forgive those who don't want to be forgiven? I mean, yeah, we can forgive people asking for it, but what's their motivation? Do they just want to be let off the hook, or did they wake up a little bit? At the end of the day, for our own mental health, our own spiritual health, our own emotional health, it's good if we can find a way to do the forgiveness work, even though how we define forgiveness and how they define forgiveness may be very different things. So a couple of you were around when I dove into the book of forgiving back when I was at Unity. And that book is really, it's a game changer if you have had issues with forgiveness, or it's like, well, whatever they did was unforgivable. I just can't, I can't forgive that. Because what it is it's kind of the compilation of the methodology that was developed during the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's work in South Africa. It was written by Desmond Tutu, the bishop, and his daughter Mpho, both of whom were part of that work with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And not to get graphic or to dive into, any of that in great detail, but some of the things that people brought up during that commission's work for forgiveness, you would think those acts were unforgivable. But those people found a way to get to forgiveness. But before we get to, kind of talking a little bit about, well, what is that and how do we do it? One of the things that's important to kind of set down in stone, or at least to put out on the table, is what forgiveness is not. Because it seems like what a lot of people are asking for these days is more like exoneration or absolution, or just, a free pass. That's not forgiveness. So, as a lot of us will know, forgiveness is not easy, and it does take hard work and a consistent willingness. And consistent is a good word. It's we have to be willing again and again and again, today and tomorrow and the next day. It's not weak. And the third bullet point on this slide is really I think the most important one for our discussion, especially for when we talk about what's going on in America right now. And that is, forgiveness does not subvert justice. And I love this part. It creates space for justice to be enacted with a purity of purpose that does not include revenge. Too often, I think that, especially in America, we have confused justice with vengeance. And, certainly all the victims of lynchings throughout the years would attest to that. But, in the case of most of them, there was not even a miscarriage of justice. It was just murder, because so many of those people were innocent of the things, of whatever crime it was they were being accused of when the lynch mob got their hands on them. But forgiveness does not subvert justice. Justice can still be done with forgiveness. But if we take out the aspect of revenge, it leads us in a different direction. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's not like we're going to just shove it under the rug or throw it in the basement or, lock it in a box and not think about it. And I also love this piece. It requires a fearless remembering of the hurt. And then this last part is very true. It's not quick, and it can take several journeys through the cycles of remembering and grief before we can finally let go of it. If you say, well, I tried that, that book of forgiveness thing and it didn't work. It's like, well, did you keep trying? It's like people that say, oh yeah, I went to those 12-step meetings, but that stuff doesn't work for me. Well, did you really work the deal, or did you just, read part of the book and go to a couple of meetings and say, I want to drink? It actually takes a serious ongoing effort, and sometimes again and again and again and again. Another thing that forgiveness is not is it's not a tool of abusers, even though they try to use it that way, right? So a lot of abusers will gaslight their victims into thinking that we deserve, or they deserve, to be forgiven. Somehow, hey, I'm a human being. I'm a nice person. I'm a this, I'm a that. I deserve to be forgiven. I'm a nice guy. I'm a hero. Desmond and Mpho point out in the book that, in their own minds, villains are the heroes, right? And so they want to use that as part of their MO. And I've got on the slide, Haley, it's a graphic of the cycle of abuse that starts with tensions building, and then there's an incident of abuse. And then there's this phase called reconciliation. And very often this demand for forgiveness, and it's not really forgiveness, it's like the free pass variety, is part of that reconciliation. And then there's the calm before the storm, and it keeps going and going. So This is not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not a tool of abuse. When we ask ourselves, why should I forgive that person or that organization or that whatever who did this thing to me? Why do we forgive? And there were several quotes that I had highlighted in the book of Forgiving, and I'm just going to share a couple of them that I think are like, this is like the really big deal. And the Tutus say that forgiveness is nothing less than the way we heal the world. We heal the world by healing each and every one of our hearts. The process is simple, but it is not easy. And I really resonate with that last sentence, because the process of sobriety is also pretty simple, but it ain't easy. And walking it is something that has to be done every day. And the forgiveness process is also something that we can be involved in every day for the rest of our lives. And we'll probably still die with a few things to forgive, but we will die with a much freer, more joyful heart than we would have otherwise had. And I was running searches on healing the world. And so there's this Michael Jackson quote, and he wrote a song about healing the world. And his quote is, "It all begins with forgiveness, because to heal the world, we first have to heal ourselves. And to heal the kids, we first have to heal the child within each and every one of us." And boy, does that ever ring a bell for me. It is absolutely true. And what's one of the things that really struck me about this book is when Desmond Tutu talks about his childhood and his abusive alcoholic father. I could have written literally word for word the section of the book that he wrote about that. I was just kind of blown away by it. And I'm still doing work with that kid that I was, and trying to help heal him. I still have work to do, honestly, but I'm also very grateful for the folks that have led me through the work that I've done so far, because it's made a big difference in how I show up and in how I experience the world. And so that's why we forgive. And this is the other huge piece. And I think they put it very well. Without forgiveness, we remain tethered to the person who harmed us. We are bound with chains of bitterness, tied together, trapped. Until we can forgive the person who harmed us, that person will hold the keys to our happiness. That person will be our jailer. When we forgive, we take back control of our own fate and our feelings. We become our own liberators. We don't forgive to help the other person. We don't forgive for others. We forgive for ourselves. Forgiveness, in other words, is the best form of self-interest. This is true both spiritually and scientifically. And what it means by that is that they've actually done studies on the effects of forgiveness on people, and it actually is good for your health to do this forgiveness work and to let go of things. And this whole idea of being bound to the other person, every time I kind of dig into this work and I get to this point, I keep being reminded of this gal from Santa Barbara who, when I was out there for a while, I remember us, kind of talking about this kind of work and about abuse, and having to do the work to let it go, to forgive people, to move on, to do what we need to do to address the pain of our childhood, and then to put it in our past. And her response, I'll never forget this, was, "You don't understand. I was abused." And I kept thinking to myself, honey, you were abused in the past, but the person who's abusing you now is you, by refusing to let go of it. And, I've had to turn that around and look at myself and think about the ways that I have chained people to me that have harmed me in some particular way. Laura caught me not too long ago talking to myself about letting go of something that happened like 15 years ago. I actually said to myself, Charles, you got to let that shit go. That was 15 years ago. I mean, it's constant, stuff that's still rattling around in the subconscious. It comes up, it comes on out into the conscious mind. And then, my mind, because I grew up in conflict, anything that feels like conflict, buddy, it'll grab a hold of and just go right straight down a rabbit hole with it if I don't grab it by the collar and say, no, no, bad consciousness, bad Charles. Let that shit go. Because it's not doing anything for me except upsetting me. And it's like, well, do I want to live upset? No. Can I go back and change it? No.
I kind of want to make a point here. I've struggled with this content in the past.
Yeah.
This is, I don't 100% agree with all of this. But one of the things I think is important to point out here is that forgiveness, I don't think it ever means saying that whatever the other person did was okay with you.
Right. Exactly.
I think that forgiveness can, in fact, in a lot of cases, out of necessity, you're saying what you did was absolutely unacceptable and I can't permit it in my life.
Yes.
I'm just choosing to evict you from living rent-free in my head. Yep.
That's exactly it. And you're exactly right. Yeah, there are some things that in order to protect ourselves, we say, yeah, we're done, right? But the thing that helps is in a way exactly what you just talked about. And we'll get into that. Some of the 4 steps, the fourfold path to forgiveness are exactly those things. We tell our story and we name the hurt specifically. This is what you did. And this is how it hurt me. This is how it made me feel, and I'm going to forgive for my own sake, whether you choose to be penitent or not. And we're all done here because that's what I need. And I'm allowing myself to have what I need to end this. Right. So if you're interested in diving into this work, this is the book of Forgiving by Desmond and Mpho Tut. And I really thought that this little piece at the beginning of it kind of sets up what it's all about. He says in South Africa, we chose to seek forgiveness rather than revenge. That choice averted a bloodbath. For every injustice, there is a choice. As we have said, you can choose forgiveness or revenge, but revenge is always costly. Choosing forgiveness rather than retaliation ultimately serves to make you a stronger and freer person. Peace always comes to those who choose to forgive. So this is the fourfold path, telling the story, naming the hurt, granting forgiveness, and renewing or releasing the relationship. And those are both equally valid and equally good. And I don't know how well you can see the little graphic that I have there. I have never found a copy of that's real easy to read, but it is key to this whole idea of understanding what they're talking about. So Haley, what this is, and you may remember this from me showing it several times in church at Unity, it's the revenge cycle versus the forgiveness cycle. So in the center of this thing is a little box, and it contains the words hurt, harm, loss. So that's kind of like the inciting incident. So in the revenge cycle, right, the hurt, harm, loss leads to pain. And there's then a choice point where, because we're in the revenge cycle, we choose to harm, right? Well, in order to be able to do that, we have to reject our shared humanity. That person who harmed me is somehow subhuman. They do not deserve, the things that I believe we all deserve as human beings. They because of whatever it was they did, they now stand outside of humanity. So then there is revenge, retaliation, payback, right? And that leads to violence and cruelty, which then causes hurt, harm, loss on the other side, which leads to pain. And that cycle goes on and on and on, chasing its tail. And, if you don't think it can't go on forever, take a look at the Middle East and, the Jews and the Palestinians. They've been at it for going on 3,000 years now. And they haven't figured out there's a way out. At least some of them haven't. And unfortunately, the ones who haven't figured it out have been able to keep all of them in the crap. But there's another choice. Okay. So we go back again to the inciting incident, whatever the hurt was, the harm, the loss, the thing that caused the pain. So at that point of pain, again, there's a choice point. And rather than choosing the revenge cycle, if one chooses the forgiveness cycle, we then choose to heal. And we start along the fourfold path. And the fourfold path starts off with telling the story. And then you go to naming the hurt, right? Number 3 is granting forgiveness. And in parentheses, that is recognizing shared humanity. And number 4 is renewing or releasing the relationship. So the important things about if we decide to go down that path, the important big pieces of this, and I've done a 6-week series on this work before, but I thought it was important enough for us to at least take a look at today in case it piqued your interest, right? When we tell our story about what happened, the important thing is to speak the truth and start with the facts. This happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. So this is not, we're not yet into the how it made me feel. That comes next, right? This is just like a chronological listing of the events that led to the inciting incident, the hurt, harm, loss, what the hurt, harm, loss was, right? So you speak the truth, you start with the facts, and you tell that story first to someone who is a friend, a loved one, or a trusted person, like your friendly neighborhood spider clergy, right? We consider telling the story to the person who harmed us if it's safe to do so and if they are willing to hear it. Or if we feel a need to say something to them, but it's not safe or they're unwilling, writing a letter, like a letter that I would send to them saying, you did this, 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 and this is why this, et cetera, this, just physically writing it out on paper and getting the story out of me, right? And then accepting that whatever has happened cannot be changed or undone. And that's a tough piece. One of the things that they wrote in there that really struck a chord with me personally was it was about the denial of these things that have happened. And that's one of the reasons that so many of us remain in abusive relationships for a long time. It's like we can't really believe that happened. And they said that for so many of us, addictions to alcohol and drugs begin with attempting to deny the things that have happened. And it's, like I tried to bury my childhood under a mountain of drugs and an ocean of alcohol. I mean, that's kind of what got me started. Was attempting to just like that did not happen, but I had to accept that what happened and that I could never go back and, and be the hero that I thought that I should have been at 12 to, to overcome my drunk, violent father, right? And if we're worried about what people think about when we tell our stories, I have a meme here. It's a quote from Anne Lamott that says, "You own everything that happened to you. Tell your stories. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better." I love that. So once we have told the facts of the story as we perceive them, and obviously everybody's going to have a different view from their foxhole, so everybody's going to see a different thing, but you tell the story the way that it happened to you. Once you've told the story, then we name what it did to us, how it felt, what the feelings were, what the specific thing that caused the pain was. And I got a picture here from Inside Out, the Pixar movie that, it's just, if you haven't seen it, you really should watch it. It's the character Sad is sitting talking with Bing Bong. But we name that hurt. We identify the feelings within the facts, right? It's like we go back through that story and say, and when this happened, it made me feel this way. And then I felt this way. And then I woke up the next day and boy, did I feel like, this. And we remember that there is no feeling that is wrong, bad, or invalid. It maybe that feeling was based on a misperception. That's okay. You still had that feeling, and the feeling was still a valid feeling. We recognize the stages of grief, and we honor wherever we are in the grieving process. And we may just still be angry about it. We find someone who will acknowledge us and listen to our feelings without trying to fix them. And that was what I loved about this little scene that I captured the screen grab of in Sad, is that Sad is just sitting there, being with Bing Bong as Bing Bong processes its feelings, and not trying to fix, not trying to even make Bing Bong happier, just being there. You need to accept your own vulnerability. And that is another really, really tough piece for a lot of us. And that's why a lot of us bury our feelings with artificial feeling enhancers, at least why I did, because I couldn't look at the feelings, much less being vulnerable to the feelings, right? But move forward when you are ready, and only when you are ready. And you may have to go through telling the story and naming the feelings a lot, right? But you don't want to get stuck there. We all have to move forward at some point. To be in your 50s or 60s and still be saying, you don't understand, I was abused. No, I understand. Trust me, right? Do you want to keep experiencing that abuse, or do you want to get well? I mean, that's the choice. It's time to walk through the valley of the shadow of death instead of camping out there. So then we get to the stage where we grant forgiveness, and we have to remember that forgiveness, it's not a magical, okay, I'm able to forgive him now. It's a choice. We make the choice and say, yeah, I'm going to forgive him now, right? I told the story. I got my feelings out. I'm going to choose to do this and choose to walk through it. And it's something that helps us as people grow. And this was a key piece. Forgiving is how we move from victim to hero in our own story. And that's why it's so important for each of us. It's like, do I want to be the victim in my story, or do I want to be the hero in my story? If for no other reason, that makes it worth it. So we know that, and this again, I'm Haley, I'm working straight off of the bullet points here. We know we are healing when we are able to tell a new story. When we're able to tell the story as I overcame this, rather than I was beaten up by this, whatever this was, right? We're now the hero in the story instead of the victim, and we've changed it. And I've broken the chain, I'm no longer being held hostage by that story. And it's hard. Don't get me wrong. I realize this is hard stuff. and it's painful stuff. But my experience has been that it's worth it. Now, finally, and this is the part where, that person, that group, that family, that entity, that whatever, they may disagree with you and say, well, you didn't forgive me because you're not talking to me anymore, or you didn't forgive me because you didn't come back, or you didn't forgive me because you left our business, or you expatriated, whatever it is. Well, that's a choice, and it's a valid choice, because the last step is renewing or releasing the relationship. Okay. Now, I found this interesting that the Tutus said that the preference is always to renew unless there is a question of safety. And I think that goes back to, their focus on shared humanity, that there must have been something that brought us together as human beings at some point. And there may be a way to begin again, right? Well, here's the thing. In order for any of this to work, well, one of the things we need to do, and this is really hard to do, is to ask for what you need from the perpetrator in order to renew or release the relationship. You get to ask for what you need. Now, if it's not safe to ask for them in person, you can put it on paper, because at that point, if it's not safe, you're going to release that relationship, right? And so maybe the most important thing you need is freedom, space, a way out. But you get to ask. And there's something important in the word renew. And there's in the graphic I have, Haley, it's actually a quote from the book with a picture of a rose. It says, "We cannot begin again, but we can plant something new." And it's like, well, it did, it's not like it used to be. No, it's not. You did this thing, right? Now, I chose to renew our relationship, so we're going to start over again. It ain't going to be like it used to be, right? It's going to be different. And that's what I'm asking for is, one of the things I'm going to ask for is how it's going to be different. If we're going to renew this thing, I need this, this, and this. I need you to commit to this and this other thing, and make sure that thing there never happens. You may need an apology, an explanation, a tangible object, or to never see that person again. The idea of a tangible object that I think about reparations to the Black community and to the whole BIPOC community, to the Native American community, to the Black community. And, that's a tangible object that they're asking for. And there are a lot of people that have a problem with that. Well, they have every right to ask for that. And the thing is that at the societal level, it's really freaking difficult for a group that's been harmed to release the relationship. I mean, it's like, what are they going to do? You can't, well, people can try to secede from the union, but it hasn't been successful so far, and it would really cause a lot of problems. And, even the Native Americans that are, on reservations, I mean, they're being treated horribly. It's genocidal, the way that we've treated them. So that ain't the answer either. But that ask, they have every right to make that ask, because we do get to ask from our perpetrator what we need to heal the relationship. And that, those are very valid real world asks. Now, they suggest that we need to look at our part in any conflict. And, as someone who's practiced the 12 steps, that's really the big thing that we do, is we look for our part. It may be painful to that may be one of the toughest things. But if we want to get through this, again, it's one of those things that's really worth it. And they point out, when you renew a relationship, it is stronger for what you've been through, but it is always different. And that is absolutely the truth. And if we don't want to start all over again, if we don't want to toxify the relationship, it is absolutely vital that we don't try to bury the feelings that we have about what happened. But the bottom line is that by renewing or releasing a relationship, you free yourself from victimhood and trauma. And people who get released sometimes don't like that. That's okay. We don't owe people who have harmed us a damn thing. This forgiveness is for what we owe ourselves. And that is the kind of peace of mind that only comes through doing this sort of work. So, where do we begin, right? There's forgiveness work everywhere, right? Right now, I mean, I've got, our nation, our representatives, certainly, our moral/political opponents, and then our families, loved ones, and abusers. And note, often these are the same people. And I'm sure we could all speak to that. And, maybe the biggest thing, at least it has been for me over the years, is ourselves. I have to start with forgiving myself. And the better I am at forgiving myself, the easier it is for me to forgive other people. And the more I practice forgiving other people, the easier it is for me to forgive myself. It's something that's like a push me, pull you. It works both ways. But it is absolutely work that is tied into how we live and how we love each other as human beings. And I know that for so many of us, this digs up stuff that is deeply painful. But as the Tutus and the folks that went through the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, found, it was how they got free. And I honestly believe that being able to do this work and again cut those chains to those people, organizations, institutions, and whatevers that have harmed us, it's a gift, and it is it's a way to live in love instead of in anger or in sorrow. And it's worth it. It's really worth it.